In this episode, I interviewed writer Larry Ceplair about his new book, The Hollywood Motion Picture Blacklist, 75 years later. We also discussed how cancel culture is a lot like the Hollywood Blacklist, which was from 1947 until 1960. And we reviewed a film that is about the blacklist called The Front, which is a great film from 1976. It was directed by Martin Ritt, who was blacklisted in the 1950s. Walter Bernstein, who was the writer, he was also blacklisted. Woody Allen is the star, as well as Zero Mostel, who was blacklisted. Herschel Bernardi, he was also blacklisted. Michael Murphy and Andrea Marcovicci. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast exploring storytelling on film, as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, or theater, or other areas of the arts. I want to welcome to the show today Larry Ceplair. He's the author or co-author of numerous books, including Anti-Communism in 20th Century America, A Critical History, Dalton Trumbo, Blacklisted Hollywood Radical, and the Marxists and the Movies, a biography of Paul Jericho. He is Professor Emeritus of History at Santa Monica College, and we're discussing his fantastic new book today, The Hollywood Motion Picture Blacklist, 75 years later, which just came out. Larry, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Congratulations on the book. It just came out a couple of days ago, I believe, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I just got my copies about a week ago.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. This is a topic I've long been interested in, and there's a number of things that I didn't know. So, before we jump into what you discuss in the book, what initially got you? Because as I said off the top, you've written a lot about this topic. What initially got you interested in diving so deep into it?
Well, two things. The first was I was living in New York in the early, I was in New York from 1972 to 1975, and I was teaching there, and I was going to a lot of 30s and 40s movies. New York has half a dozen theaters that show those, and I was really impressed with the quality of the dialogue, which I didn't think was being replicated in current movies. So I went down to to one of the libraries and started reading about movie making in the 30s and particularly screenwriters. And then I realized that screenwriters had been the bulk of those people blacklisted. I'd known nothing about the blacklist previous to then at all. Except that Dalton Trumbo had been blacklisted when I saw Exodus. I learned that. So then I started reading more about screenwriters, and the books I read about the blacklist seemed to me really condescending. They treated them just as hacks, as nobodies who became political just to make up for the fact that they were writing crummy movies. And I thought that just can't be right. I mean, my sense of social history is that hacks and nobodies don't form political movements. And so I started looking more into and I realized that these were really very serious political people. And Stephen, my co-author on The Inquisition in Hollywood, his stepfather had been a screenwriter, a very, very successful screenwriter and movie writer. And so he became interested. So anyways, between the two of us, we decided, let's do a book on this. We thought it would be maybe a couple hundred pages. It turned out to be close to 400.
What do you remember? What some of those films were that were in the 30s and 40s that you were seeing initially?
It was the screwball comedies, Katharine Hepburn, Spencer Tracy, the early Preston Sturges movies. Mitchell Leisen, I think, was another director, but yeah, those kinds of and the Ben Hecht ones, the Front Page, things like
right. And so after writing all these books, and I know you discussed this in the book, which this is basically a kind of summing up a lot of what you wrote about and depict and connecting it to things today like cancel culture and things like that. What was the main reason for you to want to revisit it on the 75th anniversary?
Well, a couple things. I'd written a lot of articles in magazines that have low circulation, so I kind of wanted to get those out into maybe a larger community. And I had also had some articles I hadn't published that I thought would also be good, cover topics I hadn't covered before. So, and then then there was the hook of the 75th anniversary of the Blacklist to kind of pull them all together. And it's always good, when you're writing about a topic for a while, to kind of step back and take account of what's happened.
There's like I said, there was a I had seen different documentaries and feature films made about it, but like I said, there was a lot I didn't know, and I'm sure there's still a hell of a lot more to read from your earlier writings. But a couple of things I wanted to ask just specifically. For example, how did HUAC, now how did they have the power to investigate someone's political beliefs? Like, was it because of this Alien Registration Act that they used to say that the Communist Party were trying to overthrow the government by use of violence? Did that give it the justification to investigate people in this way?
Well, the committee existed before the Alien Registration Act was passed. It was set up in the mid-30s. Ironically, to investigate fascism. It was basically established by a Jewish congressman from New York who wanted to look at all the fascist neo-Nazi parties that were in the United States. But it rather quickly became anti-communist, to investigate communism, which was really seemed to be much more of a threat to the United States security than the fascist groupings. Congress's power to investigate comes from its subpoena power. I mean, it has almost unlimited subpoena power. And although theoretically they're only supposed to investigate in order to create legislative acts, they never do that. That's just a quaint cover for what they're doing. But they can call anybody, subpoena anybody, and ask anything.
I see. So they just had the power to do whatever they wanted.
That's right.
Okay. And when you say that the Communist Party seemed like a more powerful threat to the security of the states, why was that at that point? Was that because of the Cold War?
No, the Cold War hadn't started yet. It was because the Communist Party was becoming its membership was increasing enormously during the Depression years. It was very, very active in organizing the industrial unions and leading them out on strikes. It was kind of a secret party, so no one quite knew who was doing what where. And of course, it was connected to the Soviet Union, which was a communist country that was perceived of as trying to export revolution.
I see. Okay, so this is as far back as the 30s, even at this right, because they initially, as you said, were concerned with fascism, and then so this growing trend of people joining the Communist Party is what really what set it off. But why is that necessarily such a threat? I mean, like, if you had people who were part of this party, I mean, why did they see that as a security threat?
Well, you have to, anti-communism has been embedded in the United States political culture since 1917, mainly because of J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI. He started. He believed, I mean, his mantra was, the Bolsheviks started out very small, and look what happened in Russia. So there's no such thing as a too small communist party in the United States.
I see.
But I said in the 30s, they became much more prominent. I mean, they were leading hunger strikes, they were leading labor strikes, they had all kinds of magazines that they were publishing, intellectuals were joining. So it just seemed, to the people like Hoover, that this was a serious threat, whereas for some reason they didn't think fascism was much of a threat.
Right, because that was more capitalist leaning, I suppose. Is that
that's right? Was that what the thing? Yeah, it wasn't anti-capitalist. Yeah.
I see. And did a lot of people join because of the Depression in the third? Did they feel that it was an answer to the Depression and to fight Nazis? Was that a big part of it? I know it's more complicated than that, but
that was huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the biggest thing, because first of all, they looked around and they saw all this misery, and no one seemed to be doing anything about it. And then there was what they thought was a successful worker state in Russia. So the combination of that, was very alluring to, literally hundreds of thousands of people.
Right, I see. And something I didn't know was, because you hear, okay, HUAC blacklisted people. So, no, something I didn't know was that HUAC, as you said, didn't actually have the power to blacklist anyone. That it was the producers in Hollywood who did it. So was their tactic with these hearings to sort of publicly, shame these people and put that out in the public so that there would be pressure for the producers to then blacklist people? Was that what they were thinking?
I think that there were two things. The main, the open agenda was we have to expose communists because they infiltrate and subvert. The hidden agenda was we were going to force you guys, as you said, by shame or guilt, to get rid of the communists in the industry. We asked you nicely, we came around and we told you before the hearing started, there were these people. You basically obstructed us. You said you could take care of it. So you obviously can't. So now we're going to expose it. And in effect, what we'll do is we'll get private groups like the American Legion, the Knights of Columbus, to boycott your movies,
right.
To picket and boycott your movies. So you'll have to do something now. You just can't no longer sit back and pretend there's not a problem.
Right, I see. And something also.
One other thing, Robert.
Sorry, go ahead.
He also gave the committee great publicity. I mean, Hollywood is an instant, guaranteed headline creating. Right. So this gave the committee a certain panache that it didn't have before.
And another thing you had mentioned that I because you'd hear, okay, this happened in Hollywood, but this happened all over the country. I mean, teachers, and different intellectuals, so many people, lives were ruined. And I wanted to ask about this element of naming names, because they wanted members or former members to admit that they were a member, to say sorry, and to name names. But they, as you said, they had so many names already. So did naming someone really make a difference, or was that just a way to degrade these people, to just see what they could get them to do? Or did it make a difference to name names?
It didn't make a difference. I mean, the committee knew all the communists in Hollywood. They had infiltrators into the party who had provided them with membership lists. No, the naming names was a degrading ceremony. It was meant to humble the witnesses and make them kind of pay obeisance to the committee and what it was doing. And it was also, it was sort of your passport back to work. If you wouldn't name names, you couldn't go back to work.
I see. And something else that you had said, that you talked about some of these various, and this is another thing I didn't know is really interesting, was you mentioned we began to see in the 80s and 90s these sort of right-wing revisionist history books about the blacklist. When the Russian Empire fell, they had found different documents where the Communist American Party was in touch with the Russians. And one of the people you mentioned, I found an interview with him. One of the people you mentioned is Alan Riskin, and he wrote this book 7 years ago called Hollywood Traitors, Blacklisted Screenwriters, Agents of Stalin, Allies of Hitler. And this is something he said here. He goes, there were almost 300 card-carrying members. They were part of a broad conspiracy of subversives who had penetrated America's most critical institutions, including our intelligence agencies, the State Department, and even the White House. And he says this about Dalton Trumbo. He's a major Stalinist screenwriter and Hitler apologist. So why does he and many people on the right believe this? Just because they had been members?
I don't know why they believed it. I mean, there is no evidence. I mean, just speaking of Hollywood, there's no evidence of sabotage, of infiltration, of revolutionary activity. It's just the notion that if you're it's a kind of a strange logic. If you're a member of the Communist Party and the Communist Party advocates revolution and sabotage and subversion, then ipso facto, you are a revolutionist, a saboteur, a subverter. They never look at what these people are actually saying or doing. It's just they have this convention in their head about what a communist is and what a communist does, and that's the end of it for them. That's the end of their reasoning process.
So they're just very simplistic, like they just group everybody as in what they all had one thought, basically.
That's right.
They didn't understand that it was complicated and people have joined for various reasons and left for various. They just ignored that, as I take it.
That's right. They have this model.
I see.
And that I mean, I must say, that works for the left too. The left has a model of fascism that they apply almost, the same way. So it's not,
right.
It's a fairly typical approach.
Right. And when I know you started researching this in the 70s. And so when all these books are coming out later, I mean, what is it like to read these books for you? Like, and you met the families, and did it really just get under your skin that this started to happen?
Oh, you mean, no, I have a pretty good perspective of history. There's a pendulum that usually swings about every 20 years,
right,
back and forth. So this was inevitable that it was going to happen. I mean, the right had kind of dominated the dialogue up until the late 70s, when I and Stephen and Nancy Schwartz started writing. So, and then we kind of had controlled, in a sense, the dialogue for about 20 years. So it wasn't surprising that this happened. I don't think they've had as much of an impact. I think that they're outliers, basically. I think most people kind of accept what the notion that the Hollywood 10 and the other blacklisted people really weren't, spies, bad guys, etc.
Right. Have you ever met any of these writers or had any confrontations with them over the years?
Well, I've not these writers. I've in the course of doing the book, I met with conservative screenwriters, who'd been very antagonistic to the communists.
Yeah,
they were fun guys. I mean, they were nice guys. They they knew they knew what was going on. I mean, it was a contest for them. It was a political contest, and they were on one side, the others were on the other.
I see.
They weren't kind of these really true believing, rigid types.
I see. Okay. Yeah, because when I read his interview, I was finding myself getting angry, and I was thinking, I wonder what Larry doing all this research, knowing these people. But it's just that was just the way I took to it, I suppose. Some of the people you focus on the most in the book. So we have Dashiell Hammett, and he wrote the novels for the Maltese. For anyone who doesn't know, he wrote the novels for the Maltese Falcon, The Thin Man, The Glass Key, and other screenplays in Hollywood. Isabel Leonard, and she wrote Funny Girl, Holiday Affair, Anchors Away, and Ring Lardner Jr. He wrote screenplays such as MASH, Woman of the Year, The Cincinnati Kid. How did you settle on these three to be a big focus of the book?
Well, each one had a kind of a different starting point. My wife and I were in Colorado one year. She had a sabbatical, and we took a course on Buddhism at Naropa Institute. And our teacher was a woman named Sarah Harding, who I learned after the class started was the daughter of Isabel Leonard, who I knew as an informer. So I asked Sarah if she would mind if I wrote an article about her mother, and she said yes. And so she provided me with whatever information she had. And I thought Isabel Leonard was fascinating because she was the only informer who was truly apologetic about having informed. And so I thought she was an interesting case study in how someone not really political ended up in the party, then left the party, and then got caught up, in this whole problem. And she basically informed because she was the sole support of everyone in her family. And so that opened my eyes better than anything before, that you have to approach the informers on a singular basis. You can't just put them into one category and say this is why they did it.
Yeah.
Ring Lardner, I was very friendly with the Lardner children. I met them in the course of doing my other books, and I wanted to. He struck me as the sort of the most even keeled of the blacklisted people. You know, and as I read him over the years, he always seemed to be very well centered and very smart about what he was doing. So I thought, yeah, this will be interesting to kind of get an appraisal of this man and what he went through. And Dashiell Hammett, I've just always loved. I mean, I read his books, many years ago, and he always seemed to me the really the oddest of all the communists, and I wanted to get into him to see if I could figure out what had motivated him.
Yeah, no, they were all seem really fascinating. I would love to read more about them. Is there any biographies on these three that you know of? Have they been written about much? I know
nothing on Isabel Leonard. Ring Lardner has written two autobiographies, one about his family and then one about himself. Hammett, there's a whole industry out there on Hammett. I mean, there's at least well over a dozen books that have been written. But I don't think any of them really focused in on what I was interested in, is why did this person, this drunkard, this man about town, spendthrift person, become as dedicated a communist as you could find.
Right.
And never backed away, never regretted what he had done.
Right. Well, I should mention for anyone listening, there's lengthy notes and bibliographies that Larry included if you're interested in reading more about the various people and the blacklist in general. There's so much to read, and there's a great bibliography at the back of the book. On the topic of naming names, probably one of the most famous people that people talk about a lot is Elia Kazan, the filmmaker, director, and theater director, who named names. I was curious your opinion. When he got the honorary Academy Award in the late 90s, a number of people didn't stand in the audience. And do you think that was unfair?
Yes, I do. I mean, first of all, even though Kazan was probably the most famous informer, the most well situated, even if he hadn't informed, it wouldn't have changed a thing.
Right.
By that point, the Cold War was so deeply embedded that whether what one individual did or didn't do didn't matter. The second thing that bothered me about it was the people who were protesting Kazan were, in a sense, doing what they had protested against in the 50s, which is you're condemning an artist for his or her politics. So I felt the whole thing was misbegotten. Even though a lot of my friends in the blacklist community were very strongly in favor of doing it, I thought it was a mistake.
Well, you have a great chapter all about the people who name names and the people who cited the Fifth, or like the Hollywood 10 who just you can watch it on. I'm sure you've seen it. You can watch it on YouTube, of course. Dalton Trumbo. He reminded me of a little of how Woody Allen handles it in The Front, where like he would ask a question back so often. It was quite. So people responded in all kinds of different ways, and often what I have also from hearing different interviews is people just really criticizing those who have named names. But it really is much more complicated when you have your family to feed, and the choice is jail or or being blacklisted and things like that. I mean, where do you just sort of understand what the choices people made in general? Or is there anyone who did anything that you felt was really unreasonable?
Well, no. I mean, as Dalton Trumbo pointed out, people were put in a position that they had no training for, no reason to think would happen, and so they were forced to make a decision. And I think it's clear that the people who named names did it for one basic underlying reason, which was to keep their jobs. I don't think there's any question about that. The people who didn't, the people who chose to resist, basically they're like Martin Luther. I can do nothing else. Here I stand. I can do nothing else.
Mm,
For them to well, two things: to name someone who you knew was a harmless individual, who was a party member but had not done any harm to the country, seemed beyond the pale. And secondly, they believed in their cause. They didn't. Why would I apologize for something I strongly believe in?
right.
Whereas a lot of the people who did inform, I think, had lost their faith in the party, or had felt mistreated by the party.
Right.
But I think for
I know
everyone,
Kazan had said that in his memoir. He like hated many of them, I believe.
yeah. Well, and Robert Rosen was
Right.
another one who'd Bud Schulberg.
Right.
So, but they all had to do some soul searching. I mean, they all had to kind of finally sit down and think, what kind of a person am I, and what effect is this gonna have on me and the others around me?
Right. Right. And what finally brought the blacklist down in 1960? I mean, I know even by 56 it had weakened. I mean, how did it just suddenly, after 13 years? I know part of it is Dalton Trumbo getting credit for Spartacus and another Otto Preminger film. I mean, did people just not care anymore?
No, that wasn't quite it. Trumbo wins the Academy Award for The Brave One in
Mm,
'56 under a pseudonym. Um, The Bridge on the River Kwai was written by two blacklisted people, and everybody knew it. The Defiant Ones was written by two blacklisted people, and everybody knew it. This was by 1959. So the Academy was beginning to feel embarrassed by all this. I mean, they didn't know now. I mean, for all they could tell, anybody they nominated now was going to turn out to have been blacklisted.
right.
And then Trumbo, who had been orchestrating all of this, he signs to write Spartacus, and Eddie Lewis, the producer, is kind of a liberal and thinks that Trumbo ought to have credit. So he's kind of pushing Kirk Douglas. Let's time has come. Let's give him credit.
Right.
But before that would happen, Otto Preminger signed Trumbo to write Exodus, and then gave a press conference in which he said, "I'm going to give Dalton Trumbo screen credit." Now, he could do this because he was an independent. He wasn't a signatory of the Waldorf agreement, whereas Kirk Douglas was making Spartacus for Universal, which was a signatory. So Preminger had much more room to maneuver.
I see.
So by August of 1960, it was clear Trumbo was going to get screen credit for two huge blockbuster films. At that point, the Academy decided we have to we can't go on with this bylaw of ours that if you were named by the committee, you can't be nominated. The producers would have been happy to continue the blacklist. It wasn't hurting them as far as they could see. If they reneged, then they might begin to look, hypocritical. Maybe they would open themselves up to lawsuits. So in effect, they said, okay, you guys can come back to work, but you're gonna have to do it on your own, make your own deals, and we'll just step back, but we're not gonna make any announcements one way or the other. So the key was Trumbo's two screen credits, I think, in 1960.
And was there any kind of, because they often had like the Legion of Decency, like they had these organizations or people who put a lot of outrage out if these people had been allowed to work. Did anyone publicly, was there any public reactions to this, or were people pretty apathetic at this point?
Well, the American Legion was unhappy about it, but they saw. Remember, this is 1960. Kennedy's going to be elected president.
Right.
They saw that the atmosphere had changed, that they had lost. They'd basically lost. I don't know if it was Maury Riskin, but one of people like that said, "Well, we've lost. The game. Yeah. The game is up.
Right.
We tried. We failed."
Right. Right. Something you also talk about in this cancel culture that we have today is very similar to blacklisting, and you know, this is also true. Is generally speaking, both the right and the left side with it. I mean, you know, things on the right, you know, like you mentioned in the book, Colin Kaepernick, he takes a knee and now he can't play anywhere in the NFL, and it's very much the right who are for that. And then on the left, you know, we've had many filmmakers and actors that, you know, who, you know, I mean, Woody Allen being an example that we're discussing coming up in the next film, who basically has been canceled out of Hollywood. Do you feel that you know, that liberals are sort of reacting like conservatives often did? Is the left becoming the right in some ways?
I don't know if they're becoming left, becoming the right, but they are acting in similar ways.
Right,
I mean,
right,
anytime you prescribe a person without due process, it seems to me you're behaving badly.
right.
And the liberals, most of all, should be aware of that, because they're the ones who usually bear the brunt of that. So for them to kind of take positions like that, I think is bothersome.
Right, right. Why do you think we've gotten to this point? Do you think that everything is so? I mean, I know there's a number of factors, but do you think people have learned enough from this time, or at least in Hollywood, or perhaps not?
I don't think people have learned anything, to be honest with you. You know, I just think, you know, this age of the internet media is just, it
Yeah,
gives anybody an opportunity to do anything. And if you can get someone's attention, which is basically what all anyone wants, then
right.
you've succeeded in, you know, in doing what you want. So you know, the social media is such a platform for amplification
Mm-hmm.
that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm not surprised.
Right. Right. No, neither am I. I wanted to touch on the front a little bit. What, you know, you also mentioned the front in the book as being one of the best films about the blacklist. Why do you think it is one of the best films about the blacklist?
It really shows the inner workings of the black market better than any other film. Walter Bernstein, who wrote it, was a writer who worked on the black market during the 50s under pseudonyms. So he really knew the ins and outs of that particular enterprise. So I think they got that right. Right. You know, they brought in the smear and clear agencies. You know, that sleazy guy who was going to help the Zero Mostel character get back,
Yeah.
and you know, and that he got that right. It, One thing that bothered me, and it bothers me about all the blacklisted films, is they're not about communists. You know,
Right.
they're about misguided liberals, and I
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
that distorts what was really going on here. But that aside, I think it was really a good look at the blacklist, better than almost any other one, I think.
Yeah, no, I love it. I really love this film. But all the writers were communists in this film, or I suppose Howard Prince being the main character. I mean, he's just like an opportunist. Is that what you mean? That perhaps
No,
the
no,
main
no,
characters were never.
the Woody Allen
Yeah,
character.
yeah,
Yeah,
Howard Prince, right?
yeah, no front would ever have gone up before the
I see
committee
what you're saying.
and done and said what he said.
I see what you.
You know,
Yeah, right,
um,
right.
and then the communists, you know, we knew they were punished, of course, but the problem is that it puts at the center of the film a Woody Allen liberal, you
I
know,
see what you. Right,
which is not quite what it was all about.
right. What do you think Hollywood was perhaps nervous that they were being like? Do you think they use liberals as the main characters because they were afraid that there would be a negative reaction to communists as the main characters?
I think so.
Yeah.
And it certainly was the case in the film with Robert De Niro
Oh,
called
this one, yeah, I have it here actually. Guilty by Suspicion, which is
Guilty
a
by
pretty
Suspicion.
pretty good, but I
Yeah,
know what you mean.
I mean,
Sorry, go ahead.
it
Go
was
ahead.
supposed to be. It was a Bertrand Tavernier production, and he hired Abraham Polanski to do the screenplay. And Polanski
Oh,
was a
yes.
communist,
Yeah.
so Polanski's central character was a communist. And then Tavernier went off to another project, or Winkler took over and said, "I don't want to. I can't do this with a communist center. It won't sell. It won't. No one will go to it." So he changed the character to a liberal, and then Polanski left the project.
Right. Yeah, I did something you had also, because this is a film I've always liked. But something you mentioned in this, which is true, is that they make this time look like there wasn't anyone fighting back. They make it look like just De Niro's the only one.
Right.
Which,
This liberal who has no political background all of a sudden
right.
becomes the great fighter for civil liberties in Hollywood. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
strange.
Yeah, it's far too idealistic. It is enjoyable. I quite like the performances, but now that I know more about it, I feel like I like it less, which is which is a shame. But The Front, again, is a wonderful film. Did you ever meet Martin Ritt?
Yes, I did actually. I was in this. It was called the Socialist Media Group in Los Angeles, and he came to talk to us one evening about himself, his filmmaking, etc. So yeah, and my wife knew him also. Before she was my wife, she used to go to a restaurant that he went to regularly, and
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah.
And so he was blacklisted until 57. How did he get cleared? Because he didn't name names. How
No,
did that come about?
I think people. I don't really know the backstory to that. I think people began to see that he really wasn't a problem. That if his name was on something, people weren't going to object to it.
Right, right. And did you know anyone else connected to this film? Did you ever meet Walter Bernstein or
I did meet. Yeah, I met Walter Bernstein. We were on a panel once, a blacklist panel once in New York.
oh,
Let's see. I don't think I met any of the other members of the people who made that movie.
Zero Mostel? He's been dead for. He's been. I'm not sure when he passed. I think he passed not long after this film.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this was his last feature film, I believe. What's what's so great about this film is that on the surface, you put Woody Allen as the lead, and just looking at the cover, you think, oh, okay, this has got to be a comedy, but it's not really a comedy. I mean, what I love about it is that it fits into the drama category, the comedy. You can't really put it in any kind of a box. I mean, what would you say? Would you say it's sort of a comedy drama, or
It's Chekhovian in some ways. You kind of laugh through the tears. I mean, here are these guys who aren't working for no very good reason. Woody Allen is putting himself on the line. Zero Mostel is obviously a torn individual. So yeah, I think it's a very good cross, I think, between comedy and tragedy. I think that's what makes it kind of effective.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it has a wonderful arc because, and what something Martin Ritt said that I thought was interesting was that, it was a ludicrous time. So the fact that there is something funny about the fact that these guys had to get fronts to put their names on scripts. And then you put a guy like Woody Allen in there, who's this opportunist, cashier who's got all these debts early in the film to his brother and to various people, the grocer played by Danny Aiello. And what I like so much is that he's enjoying everything at first. He's spending, he falls in love with that female producer. And then at a certain point when he's finally named by Zero Mostel, and then Zero Mostel commits suicide, you certainly begin to see that change in him where now he's starting to see the how brutal and tragic this is, and they set it up so well. I mean, Bernstein, that last scene where you don't really know what he's going to do because you believe he says he's going to just cooperate, and they've got that great scene with Michael Murphy and everybody where they're all saying, well, you should do this and you should do that. And Michael Murphy was right. He's like, you know what, you gotta make your own choice here. And that last scene is wonderful when he just, that great classic line is go fuck yourself. Is just it's so perfect. And the irony of the last shot with the hand, he's kissing the woman and the handcuff on his hand as they drag him to prison. I just really loved it. Are there some standout performances for you in this film outside of Alan or Zero Mostel?
Yeah, Zero Mostel's a little over the top as he usually is.
Yeah, yeah.
I like Michael Murphy's character quite a
He's
bit.
really good. Yeah, I've always
Yeah.
liked him a lot.
And interesting. One of the people there at the table, one of the three people at the beginning was also a blacklisted writer, John Gough. So that I kind of like that they brought in. The thing about Woody Allen that I liked in this was that he is a schlemiel, he is an opportunist, but he's also a loyal friend.
Yeah,
And he's
yeah.
willing, to do this for his friend. And then, of course, as time goes on, he begins to realize, yes, he gets caught up and he becomes aggrandizing himself, but he still stays loyal, all the way through. I mean, so that's a good, a nice thread through the movie.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't really see him do much drama, and I really thought he handled it really well, particularly when he goes to Zero Mostel's funeral and the camera begins at the back of his head and it pans around. And I thought his reactions as everything is starting to change for him, and his consciousness is growing. I thought that was really good. And I had actually wasn't too familiar with the female lead in this. I thought that their chemistry was really good. Sorry, I forget her name. I'm not too
Andrea
familiar.
Marcovicci.
That's it. I don't know if you're familiar with her much.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, I was looking at her IMDb, her resume, and I wasn't too familiar with her, but I thought the chemistry between the two of them were great. And I like how there was a slight guilt that he was lying to her, which quickly goes away. And then of course he confesses later. But it's such a simple story, but I just find it I find it really powerful. And after reading your book, it just you see the spineless producers bending over backwards for HUAC. Of course, you see the tactics from HUAC. You see the communist, the blacklisted writers and what they have to do. You see the choices people have to make. It really, I mean, when you have the people who are actually blacklisted making it, obviously it's going to be more on the nose than other productions. But it's really really wonderfully done. Was there something else you wanted to just mention in general about the film?
No, but but you mentioned lying. I mean, lying was all had to become almost second nature to people on the blacklist.
Right.
Because you couldn't. I mean, fronts couldn't reveal anything. The people who were doing the writing couldn't reveal anything. You had to take out all kinds of bank accounts under aliases.
Yeah. There's that scene where they discuss that and taxes and everything. And
yeah, I mean, parents told their children, "Don't say anything when you go to school. Your father is a telephone linesman." I mean, it was just there was this whole subculture of subterfuge.
What that is so stressful. God, yeah, that I appreciate that they didn't just kind of sort of push the story through those things. Like they did, like the characters all talk about, oh, what about taxes? What about how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? So it has a lot without, being, like a book, like truly detailed in every aspect. But I like that they went through a lot of those elements. I agree. I mean, Mostel is somewhat over the top, but you really felt that desperation and despair, and the humor, even when when they're he's fully ready to cooperate and they're questioning him, and he says he only joined because he liked that woman with the big ass. just the way he said it, and he was so desperate. And of course, that scene later where he goes with Howard Prince to do a nightclub act, and they were going to give him 500, then it went down to 250, and he snaps on that guy. And when he's drunk and they throw him out, oh my God, that was he really, I mean, it had happened to him, right? So you feel like you're just watching someone's real life. I mean, it's quite stunning. I mean, did those moments grab you, or did you just feel he was over the top in general?
No, I mean, I think he captured the anguish pretty well.
Yeah.
And the desperation of many people. But but it was also a bit distorted because most of the people on blacklist weren't desperate, and they didn't go through that
I see.
kind of that emotional. They just said, okay, what next? How
Right.
do I get through this? How do I make the best deal I can? So again, but not terribly so, and it worked dramatically, as you pointed out.
Right. But some people did commit suicide, right? Like you saw with his character. Was that right?
Um,
Maybe I'm wrong.
only Philip Loeb, I think, committed suicide. I mean, some people died prematurely, and like John Garfield
Yeah,
and
right. The heart
Canada
attack.
Lee,
Yeah.
and people
Yeah.
think that was because of the pressure of the blacklist. But no, these were tough people. I
Yeah.
mean, these were
Yeah.
really tough people.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, their basic attitude was, I think Michael Wilson said it to me, it's like going to war. It's an incredible experience, but you sort of were sorry you had to go through it. I mean,
Yes.
it toughened you in many ways, but all things considered, we would have liked to avoid it.
Oh God, no, God, that's for sure. That's for sure. Are there any other, movies that you would suggest people check out, either that are about the blacklist or just movies made by either, Bernstein or Martin Ritt that you'd recommend, or Trumbo?
Well, Bernstein and Ritt, they did the Molly Maguires, which I think is a terrific
Oh
labor
yeah,
movie, and it's also
yeah,
about betrayal,
right.
so that's quite good. Trumbo, I think Trumbo's one, "Lonely Are the Brave," is really his masterpiece. And the title's ridiculous, but it's it's a terrific movie.
That is really
Uh,
good. Yeah.
um, in terms of the blacklist, the most of the documentaries I think are problematic, but there's a documentary about Waldo Salt that's really very, very good.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
Waldo Salt wrote
Yeah, Midnight Cowboy and
Midnight Cowboy and taking coming home,
yes.
coming home
Yeah,
with
you're right. Yeah.
Jane Fonda and um, but he was a really bright guy, and he had an interesting career, and he's very eloquent about it. And it's you see the blacklist is just one aspect of his life, a downtime for sure, but you see it's just part of the arc of his existence.
Do you remember what that documentary was called?
I think it's called Waldo Salt.
Okay. Okay.
It's in, I have it it's in my filmography.
Okay. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, you're right. I just double checked. Coming Home, Waldo Salt and Robert C. Jones wrote the screenplay. Yeah, that's a film. He also did the voiceover. Did you ever see the film Blast of Silence from the
No.
early '60s? It's like, okay, yeah, it's really really good noir, I suppose neo noir because it's in the '60s, but it's black. It's got the expressionistic black and white documentary like feel to it. But yeah, I'll have to check that one out. I just lastly wanted to mention Herschel Bernardi, who was like one of the producers in the film. I imagine you didn't meet him.
I did not meet him.
He
I
could.
saw him perform Fiddler on the Roof, but I never met him.
Oh, yeah, he was also great as this spineless producer who's bending to the HUAC's demands. I love that, particularly that one scene. I thought the comedic timing was perfect, where Woody Allen as Howard Prince, convinces him to take a stand, and, and he's on the phone, taking a stand, and then as soon as he hangs up, he's like, "No, they won't do it." Like he's like, it was just so it was so perfectly done. I have to get this on Blu-ray. Actually, I know that there is a Blu-ray that Indicator put out because it's such a great film. Well, Larry, I really enjoyed talking to you. I appreciate that you took the time to come on today. Again, I really really like the book, which just came out again. Everyone, it's called the Hollywood Motion Picture Blacklist 75 years later. And I imagine people can get it pretty much anywhere online or.
Pretty much, yeah, Amazon for sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. And thanks so much to the University Press of Kentucky for publicists for connecting Larry to the show. So Larry, thanks again for coming on. I hope that maybe we can come again sometime and talk some more.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. I enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and or listening. If you are currently listening to this on the audio version of my YouTube channel and you've run out of episodes to listen to, head over to the YouTube channel where every single episode that I have ever recorded can be found. Go to youtube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. If this is your first time here on my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.